Hello and welcome to the Paxmundi show, where we'll be trying to shed some light on the new dark age, the war of terror, and to try to deconstruct some of the myths and disinformation around that war of terror. First off, with tales and news from the dark side. In Iraq, on the 10th anniversary of the US-UK invasion, a series of bomb blasts have ripped through Baghdad and surrounding towns on the 10th anniversary of the invasion. At least 56 people died in more than a dozen explosions, most of them car bombings. We'll have more on Iraq later in our feature. Moving on to Somalia, a suicide car bomber killed at least 10 people in the capital of Mogadishu. The militant group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. The blast intended to target a group of government officials, but instead hit a vehicle carrying civilians. Over in Yemen, Yemen has actually launched a national dialogue to usher in elections. A new constitution after the popular uprising that forced President Saleh from power. A number of groups are protesting that they are being excluded from the UN-backed talks, and that the talks don't include the option of independence for South Yemen. On an international scale, there is, you may have probably heard about the current global arms treaty that is being negotiated by the UN. This is the first ever global arms treaty, where we, in an age when we have virtually every product that you can think of actually governed and administrated, and rules on the exports of most products these days. We still have no treaties on the sale and export of arms. However, the National Rifle Association in the US has thrown its weight against US agreement to this treaty. They're trying to block its ratification in the US, and that needs to be watched. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for a deal on Monday. Ban Ki-moon said, "This is no doubt a difficult issue, yet the absence of the rule of law in the conventional arms trade defies explanation." On the international arms trade, it's been exposed that each year over 250,000 US guns are sold and knowingly smuggled into Mexico to actually add to the violence in the state's war against organized crime and drug gangs. Over in Afghanistan, I've mentioned previously about President Karzai's order to the US troops to actually leave the Wardak province area. That was over a month ago, and US forces are still sitting it out. There are ongoing protests, daily demonstrations in Kabul by residents from the Wardak province. One of the demonstrators, Khalila Ibramakali, stated, "We've gathered here to protest against the special forces in Wardak. They enter people's houses and torture innocent people. they've also detained 10 people, and it is not clear what has happened to them. In the US, again, an issue that we've discussed before over the US government's refusal to provide any information on drone strikes, particularly the CIA drone strikes. A federal appeals court has now ruled that the CIA cannot ignore freedom of information requests on its targeted killing program based on secrecy. So on Friday, the appeals court reversed a lower court ruling dismissing an attempt by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, to obtain information on the killings through the Freedom of Information Act. This ruling means the CIA must now disclose parts of its records on drone strikes to the courts. So that's all of the news for the moment. Tonight's topic is it's a 10th anniversary of the invasion, US-UK invasion of Iraq. And, I'd just like to, look at how things have gone in Iraq since then, and recent revelations about the intelligence that led to that invasion, and some of the other theatres that are looking to be extended in the global war of terror, like Syria. So many of you may have seen the recent BBC Panorama investigation programme. If not, I would recommend, checking it out. The Panorama investigation revealed for the first time the lies that were used to sell the Iraqi invasion. For example, the evidence based on testimonies of Iraqi defectors have been exposed as fabricated frauds. When Colin Powell presented the case to the UN for Iraqi intervention and invasion in February 2003, he referred to first-hand witness evidence of Iraq's bio-weapons program, their alleged weapons of mass destruction. Now, this evidence was coming from an Iraqi refugee in Germany who claimed that he was a biological weapons engineer. We don't actually know his identity or, much more detail other than his nickname, his name as Curveball, under which he gave evidence. He alleged that he'd actually been involved in this program, that he'd been developing biological weapons as a part of Saddam Hussein's biological weapons program. This person was, it appears, later given German nationality and was paid substantial amounts of money for his evidence. He recently admitted to the BBC he made it all up. Another spy was the Iraqi army major Mohammed Harid, who defected over to the Iraqi National Council. He claimed that he'd actually been involved in buying, procuring and setting up these mobile chemical weapon laboratories. You may recall in the run-up to the war, they were talking about Saddam Hussein, or his forces hiding these mobile biological weapons labs, in the desert and around Iraq. This again was complete fabrication. This evidence was used as prima facie evidence of Iraqi's chemical weapons capability. So many of the sources of information have now been discredited following this program. Many of these people materially benefited from giving this evidence. They had an interest, either they were paid or they became a part of the Iraqi establishment. One such figure was Liad Alawi. You may remember him. He was previously the Prime Minister before Maliki. He claimed that he'd heard the rumour, this became transformed into fact, that the Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein had the capability to deliver weapons of mass destruction, missiles, to the West within 45 minutes. Now, again, this was a complete fabrication. Even the MI6 and the CIA had no credibility in these people, in Alawi, in this evidence, yet it was used as a part of Blair's dodgy dossier that was used to justify the invasion of Iraq. As I was saying, all of this evidence and information was discredited by the intelligence services. We knew it wasn't true. The whole world knew that, there was clearly no evidence, independent evidence of any program of weapons of mass destruction. Now we learned through the BBC that all of the evidence was fabricated. In the Panorama program, a former head of MI5 says the intelligence and facts were fixed around a policy that war and regime change were inevitable. So we have to see these deceptions of Blair and Bush as a part of a long-term changing game plan of fixing lies around the strategic interests of the US and the UK, other states in Europe, to balkanize the Middle East. And this is in order to be able to basically exploit the region's mineral resources, the petrochemicals, and to have regional control, to break these states up into smaller entities, to create disunity and conflict within those states. Now, the Iraq war cost billions, with over 1 million Iraqi civilians killed and several millions permanently displaced. The damage to the Iraqi infrastructure was phenomenal. The infrastructure was destroyed. All its industrial capability was destroyed. Its capability to actually run services for the people of Iraq were destroyed, and they've never been replaced, despite the alleged spending on rebuilding Iraq. The money that was actually provided after they'd actually taken all of the foreign currency reserves and bullion that belonged to the Iraqi government and taken those to the US, the Coalition Provisional Authority brought in these pallets of US dollars, which were allegedly supposed to be used to rebuild Iraq. But the Provisional Authority, under the Governor Paul Bremer, under his rule, they have been alleged to have mislaid 8.8 billions during the Iraqi reconstruction. This is only what has been revealed by Congress investigations and questionings. There was another 6.6 billion that went missing of Iraqi government funds. Now, all of the money allegedly spent on rebuilding Iraq went generally to multinational corporations and kickbacks to their Iraqi allies. There's very, very little that went back into the rebuilding Iraq. The country is still devastated. Many areas lack clean water, they lack sewage facilities, electricity only runs for an average 8 hours a day. There are no very limited public services in the way that we know them. Now, on top of that, the effects of the war are horrific. We have a regime, the Maliki regime, which is another dictatorship, which is practicing the same terror and torture that the Iraqis experienced, well, formerly under Saddam Hussein, but latterly under the Allied occupation, and now this is the way of life in Iraq. All society has been realigned along lines of ethnic divisions. So what we have seen is everybody, whether if they're Sunni, they stay in the Sunni areas, they vote for Sunni parties. The Shiites, the dominant group now running the government, again marginalizing the Sunni areas, and we've seen ethnic cleansing within those areas. In the north of the country, we've seen the sort of autonomy of the Kurdish area increasing, with a regional government in Kirkuk, and now negotiating its own agreements with oil companies in the northern part of Iraq, and essentially running its own militias, its own military forces, and there is a de facto autonomy from Baghdad. There is ongoing ethnic violence. Bombings are commonplace. This is, of course, blamed on Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which supports the myth that Al-Qaeda is this global enemy, but also that in Iraq, Al-Qaeda was a main player. Now, some of the justification for the war were that Al-Qaeda was an Iraqi-based group. This was clearly never the case at the time under Saddam Hussein, but has become a fact now. Moving on, the Iraqi people are still also dealing with the effects of the actual weaponry that were used, particularly chemical weapons, particularly in a place called Fallujah, which is just north of Baghdad. There was an assault on Fallujah, which used various chemical weapons, phosphorus, bombs, a napalm-like material that's called MK77, and also depleted uranium. The effects of the depleted uranium in particular are being shown through the phenomenal increase in the rise in congenital deformities. This is babies that are born with horrific deformities. I'm just going to basically take a couple of calls now. We've got lines open for calls on 004416129802998, or you can Skype at Bob's Backyard. I think we have a call from Prajna online. Are you there, Prajna?
Yeah, there were a few things that I was going to say, Bob. One you were talking about the idea that there was Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and in fact, I've heard some stories about some of the bombs that go off, and there've been various Iraqis who've been hired by the American military to go and do things like, you know, take a car somewhere, find a crowded place, and then ring them back, or wait for a phone call, and what had happened was that they'd rigged the car up with explosives, and the phone call, had it succeeded, would have caused one of these bombs to go off. But, you know, something happened, the phone didn't go off, the guy then thought, oh well, nothing's happening, and went away and found out that actually it had all been, you know, he'd been sent out as, quote, suicide bomber, unquote. and this phone call was going to trigger the bomb. So they're using Iraqis, tricking Iraqis into doing that kind of thing. Also, Iraq was the thing that really woke me up. I mean, 9/11 for sure, but that's still being argued about. But with Iraq, it became completely obvious to me that the elite just weren't worried about what law was and what law was not. And the main point is that Chief Justice Jackson at Nuremberg said that waging a war of aggression is not only an international crime, it's the supreme international crime. And that's what really invalidated our whole system, that we could commit the supreme international crime and then expect anybody on any level to take any notice of any law. It was also one of my first actions as well, because not long after the war started, they found an arms dump. And in the arms dump, they found some big wooden crates with a whole lot of rockets in them. And these rockets were made by a small arms factory in Hampshire at Middle Wallop. Well, I was living in Middle Wallop. And I can't remember whether I saw this on the television or read it in the paper, but I thought, that's the fireworks factory just down the road from us. So I gathered up my lad and we sat there between us in the kitchen, cutting out some nice stencils and got a couple of spray cans, got all dressed up in camo gear, and went up all along the hedges and so on till we got up to the sign for this factory, and they had a great big sign up out on the road. So we just stuck this template over the top and sprayed on it little things that just said, by appointment to Saddam Hussein. And the funny thing was, we went back the next morning and the whole sign had disappeared. They'd taken it down completely. So that was my input on Iraq.
Yeah, thanks for that, Prajna. We'll get back to later to the issue of the coalition forces Black Ops. We've now got another caller online. Sadama, are you there?
Hello, Nigel. Yeah, I'm here. Just with something that Prajna said, I'm sure that I saw something where he said that there were some Iraqis that were getting paid to go out in cars, but I was sure that there was some British SAS people that were dressed as Iraqis going and parking cars up because they got arrested once, and within a few hours of them being put in the cell, an American tank broke into the jail where they were and set them free.
Yeah, that's very interesting. On the British Special Forces Ops, these, I think they were SAS soldiers who were actually arrested by the Iraqi police in Basra with, as you say, dressed as Arabs with explosives in the car. They were put in prison, and the authorities said they were going to conduct an investigation. The British demanded their release, and when they didn't get it, it was actually the British assaulted it. It was they had a helicopter assault on the prison, blew the prison compound up, rescuing their prisoner, their two SAS men, and releasing several hundred Iraqis from the prison. There was never any inquiry into that incident. It's just gone into, under the carpet for the moment. That's one that shouldn't go away. You know, we need to continue to ask for those kind of clarifications about these black ops. What were they doing? On the Iraqis being used for bombings, I remember at that time hearing tales from Iraqis about how they were being stopped at checkpoints, and then they would have their car searched, and then they would be allowed to go off and would later search their truck or car and find, bombs in them. So I think there was a lot of that going on during the occupation. Do we have any more callers out there at the moment? Hello, Sadama.
Thanks, Nigel, for that, clearing it up. Yeah, I know I'd heard something, but yeah, thanks for straightening it out for me.
That was down in Basra, actually. And Basra, if you ever buy date syrup, we do because we love this stuff, you'll find that comes from Basra. And you'll also find that we've been using depleted uranium around all of that. So one of the best sources for dates and date syrups is Iraq. And, of course, now it's all contaminated with depleted uranium.
I didn't know that. I've been eating depleted uranium date syrup. Oh, God.
Well, I'm afraid so.
You know what all this conversation boils down to, and it's something I've been aware of for quite a while now, but it seems to be becoming more and more polarised. Myself and Prajna are kind of in the habit, I think, of pointing the finger at Israel and saying, pariah state, look at the atrocities that Israel commits. But what's becoming more and more obvious and unavoidable is the fact that it's the British and the US administration are, if not worse, equally as bad as Israel. We are these states which we inhabit by fluke of birth or what have you, are the pariah states. We're out there, they're out there tearing up the world in order to lay hands on resources, mineral resources. And it's not just the Middle East, it's Africa as well. We do to Africa too. And there's just no avoiding the fact that, anywhere we go in the world, we're to be hated simply by accident of coming from a place by birth.
When I joined the army, I thought we were the good guys, and at that time the Russians and the Argentinians were the bad guys. And it wasn't until I left the army and had a look at history, and I found out actually we've been the bad guys for as long as history can relate in one form or another. And okay, it might have been centered at this time in history in the church, and it might have been centered at this time in history in the monarchy and so on. But we've been, a colonialist or empiric state for as long as history relates.
Yeah. And that hasn't changed. It's just it's had a little bit of makeup here and there, a little bit of window dressing, to try and present the state, these states to the world as free states, when in fact they're anything but free. And to sell this consumer society across developing countries as well, like it's something wonderful and to be aspired to. And exactly the opposite is true. Not only are we a pariah state around the entire globe and have been forever, these nations that we invade or that we sell consumerism to have got much, much better ideas of how to live with the planet and with each other than we do. And yeah, I just get very angry and frustrated, and then try and redirect that energy into something positive to do something about it. But I'm sorry, I don't have a hell of a lot to contribute to this conversation, but, jumping up and down and say, what the fuck's going on? Why are we falling for this shit, Even though I know that we're not falling for this shit. Yeah, sorry, I can only rant on this topic.
No, thanks for that, Carly. That's really important. You've actually touched on the theme of what I was trying to talk about tonight, which is Britain's role, in this this war of terror, the game plan. We too often refer to, for example, Iraq in the BBC and the media this week. They've been talking about the US-led invasion of Iraq. Well, no, let's get this right. Blair made the excuses and provided the dodgy dossier and all the justification that allowed the US to go to war with the UK. We were there. We were there. We were organising it and leading it. Just like now, we seem to be also preparing to move on to intervention in Syria. Now, just a few weeks ago, Syria's President Assad made a statement to the world about a British conspiracy to overthrow his government and destabilize Syria with civil war. He didn't say US or, French or any other one. He said a British conspiracy. Now, these allegations were obviously strenuously denied and ridiculed by William Hague, the British Foreign Secretary. But in the last 2 weeks, it's subsequently been revealed by the Prime Minister, Cameron, that Britain is actually training the Syrian Free Army secretly in Jordan. We've got special forces training these terrorists before they go into Syria. And now he's stated his intention to arm the Syrian rebels with the capability to defeat the government forces and to overthrow the Assad regime. And this is in complete opposition to a current European-wide embargo on sending weapons into Syria to escalate the situation. So clearly, what Assad was saying is, the case, and Britain is not. We're not just a game player. We are. I would say, we have been for a century or more. We've been leading this assault on the Middle East, and we are currently, organising and supporting these people. What I wanted to really ask a few questions about, to look at the Syrian opposition. Now, you probably have heard just in the last few days that the Syrian National Council has chosen its interim prime minister, and they have chosen a US citizen. They have elected a US educated former businessman, Ghassan Hito, as the provisional prime minister who will administer the free areas and would be head of the provisional government that they are looking for the West, for their allies, Britain, the US, France, to recognise. Now, this man is interesting. He's an American citizen who's not lived in Syria for years and years, and is a business person, very much in the mode of Ahmed Chalabi, who was at one time the leader of the Iraqi National Council. So you will have heard about this Syrian National Council. Now, who is it? What is it? Does it represent genuine political groups in Syrian society? Is it the coordinating group of a coalition, as is alleged? It's a coalition of different political organizations who want democracy and freedom and human rights and all these things in Syria. Or is it merely a facade for foreign strategic interests? So I've done a little bit of investigation on the Syrian National Council, and here's the case. The Syrian National Council's manifesto, their blueprint for foreign intervention, was actually written for them by a chap called Michael Weiss. Now, he is an American. He's also the Director of Communications for the Henry Jackson Society, a London-based think tank whose sponsors include the rabid Bush-era neocons Richard Pearl and William Crystal. Now, Weiss actually originally wrote the paper, which sketches out how a foreign intervention might take place, how it might operate. The program was called A Safe Area for Syria, an assessment of legality, logistics and hazards. Weiss also blogs for the Telegraph newspaper, and he also works for a Zionist lobbying group, the Just Journalism, which actually monitors Middle East news in the UK from an Israeli perspective. So they're monitoring the news, the reporting on the Middle East to make sure that it has the right slant, i.e. pro-Israel slant. Now, this paper that I was referring to, the Safe Area for Syria, this was originally commissioned by Barada TV, another US-sponsored but London-based Syrian opposition TV satellite station. Now, the Henry Jackson Society also previously wrote a document, the outline for the Libyan intervention, bringing democracy to Libya. And we've seen what happened there. The intervention in Libya resulted in the fragmentation of Libyan society along tribal lines in the fashion of Iraq, with no central authority, localized rule by tribal-based militias, and a developing tribal civil war. So when you're looking at how this opposition is organized, it's being, although it's nominally based in Istanbul, in Turkey, the support for it is coming from London, very obviously London-based. And you have to ask about these organizations, the cui bono, who benefits. So we've seen in Iraq the overthrow of Iraq, the destruction of Iraq, but what happens? The oil keeps flowing out of Iraq, and Western corporations keep benefiting. Again, Libya has fallen apart. It's in a state of anarchy, yet the gas keeps flowing out of Libya, again into the hands of the oil multinationals, and the arms keep flowing back in. But the citizens of these territories have no security and no public services. Now, what I was just saying is it now does look like the British government is openly stating that they're going to arm the Syrian Free Army. They're training them. They are fronting the next stage of the Syrian proxy war. to overthrow the Syrian regime and try to replace it with somebody that they think they can do better business with. I just wonder if anybody would like to really pick up from that. That is, my point now is we're going into war in Syria, and what are we going to do about it? We've got to talk about it.
Nigel, I'd like to leap in on that for sure, because one of the other things that's very misleading is referring to these people as Syrian rebels. Actually, an awful lot of them aren't Syrian. They have no relationship with Syria. They're just jihadis gathered from all over the Middle East, having been indoctrinated in Wahhabism, which is a very, very perverse form of Islam designed really just to create terrorists. And recently we've been told that these so-called rebels have got chemical weapons. And I just watched one of their video releases about these chemical weapons where they were busy poisoning rabbits and so on. And they were saying in there, well, we've seen our wives and children suffer, and now we're going to make your wives and children suffer. But actually, these people haven't been made to suffer by anyone in Syria. They don't even live in Syria. They've been snuck in and they've been armed by the West in order to create all of this war. And if you want to see just how false the thing is, have a look into the kind of people that they're calling Syrian rebels over there.
Yes, thanks for that, Prajna. That's a good point, really. Many of the so-called Syrian rebels are foreign fighters, the same foreign fighters that we saw in Libya, in Iraq. And they are the same, ironically, they are the same people that we're ostensibly fighting this war of terror against. That these Islamic fundamentalist armed groups, but except that this time they're on our side. We're arming them and we're supplying them. Clearly, this is very, very similar to the Libyan situation. I think there's been a lot of confusion over the types of political change that's been going on in Middle Eastern countries. All of these various conflicts, internal conflicts, have been referred to as the Arab Spring. Now, in some countries, like Egypt, particularly Tunisia, and Bahrain, we've seen a very grassroots political organization of civil disobedience, demonstrating, trying to bring about political change through civil disobedience. But what we've seen in Libya and Syria is very different. I think from the beginning they have been armed uprisings, or rather armed interventions by military groups from outside, or who were organized from outside and are armed by other countries. They are proxy groups. I think this was the case in Libya. We saw the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, which was a group that had actually been set up originally by MI6, our counter-intelligence organization, to bring about the regime change there. they actually previously had an armed uprising, which failed, and that was exposed by David Shaler. I don't know if anybody remembers that episode. That was in the somewhere around 96, I think, in the mid-90s. And this same Islamic fighting group was at the front of the Libyan revolt. Similarly, here in Syria, the original revolts in Homs, which was where it started, were, I am led to believe, an uprising by armed groups who came over the border from Iraq or another state, and actually started an armed uprising against the government there. And again, there's been so much misinformation about this. We've seen alleged demonstrations where demonstrators are being fired on, where there was talk of snipers shooting at the demonstrators, and of course it was alleged that that these people were Syrian government snipers shooting on the demonstrators. So there's a lot of black ops going on there, a lot of misinformation, and it's difficult to actually get a clear picture in Syria. So, did you have something, Chris?
Hello.
Do you have something to say, Chris? Do you want to come in there, please? Okay, well, so kind of continuing, what we've got is a disintegrating situation in Syria, where we've been led to believe that it's the Syrian government that is doing all these bad things. We have, I think, Prajna, you mentioned the chemical weapons. Now we're having allegations that it's the Syrian government forces who are using chemical weapons. I think this is more disinformation. Possibly.
I think that was a plan from the beginning, Nigel. I think the plan was to ship chemical weapons in there, arm the rebels with the chemical weapons, create, this is just standard false flag stuff they've been pulling all over the place. The rebels will use the chemical weapons and then they'll turn around and blame it on Assad. This is standard practice in these wars.
So in terms of what do we do about this? How do we stop this drift to war? What concerns me is the kind of indifference that British people have to these military interventions now. At one time, say 2003, we had a massive political campaign. We had demonstrations of 500,000 people, in London at the time of the, proposed Iraqi intervention. But now there's very little opposition, very little feeling amongst the population of other than indifference. The British people seem to be so concerned with their own personal financial security, with the attacks which our own government is making on us. It's what do we do about this? How do we get it out there to people and let the world know that this isn't, we don't support this, that this is, a lot of us are not happy that this is being done in our name, and we want to up the ante. So I've just been informed that the show's coming to an end shortly. I wonder if we've got any more contributors before the show ends.
2003 saw the biggest march in human history. 2 million of us got out on the streets of London, and also they had the debate in Parliament over going to war in Iraq, and there was a speech from Robin Cook in there, and I thought, having listened to that speech, that there was no way in the world they could possibly vote to go to war after that speech. And equally, everyone thought there is no way in the world that they could ignore 2 million people on the streets of London and in Hyde Park in London. And when they went ahead anyway, I think everybody felt completely impotent and hopeless and helpless to do anything about it. And the only cunning scheme that Carly and I have come up with is we're just not going to pay any of their taxes anymore. We don't pay council tax, we don't pay road tax, we ain't going to pay bedroom tax, not that we've got a bedroom anyway, but just absolutely pull out of every form of revenue that we can going back to the state. And that's the best that we've been able to come up with so far. And then, of course, everyone will say, yes, but then they'll send along bailiffs and they'll do this. Of course they will. Yeah. Of course they will. They've taken one home away from us. We're getting ready for them to take the next one as soon as we can get back out on the road again. And then when they've done that, we'll get another one and they can do that as well.
We'll keep
doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it until things change.
We're not giving them a penny. We're not giving... We don't mind actually spending time talking to cops and people like that, explaining why it is we will not have a bar of this nation state. And yeah, that is the only solution, really. No, it's no good just me and Prajna and a couple of other people around the country not paying their taxes. People en masse have to not pay tax to these war criminals.
But hopefully we'll give a lead for people to follow. And that looks like we're just about coming up to the end of the show there. Yeah. So back to you, Nigel.
No tax for war.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the contributions. I think there's a lot more to go on, and clearly, we're going to be talking more about the situation in Syria in coming weeks. So just like to thank you again for tuning in, and I hope to you'll be listening next week.